Salutations, hello, and hey, y'all. I am Brandy A. McPherson. The cool kids call me Bam, as you can see, and you may know me as Priestess Ajay Ayefe. And I am here with this beautiful young lady.
You said young, it threw me off. Child.
You girl, no.
But thank you. Thank you very much. I am Queen T, also known as Priestess Eva Pomile Omowari Ogbonyomi, and I am the practical priestess. And I am excited about this segment because y'all make me tired and sick, and I'm just irritated with the disrespect of our voting rights because y'all don't be voting in primaries. Y'all don't be voting in local elections. Y'all vote once every 4 years, and it pisses me off. So we're going to talk about it today. Go ahead, Priestess.
Okay, see, now we're here to make sure that we do the things that don't piss off my good sis, okay? And so in that, we're going to talk about voting the entire ballot, y'all. We want to talk about what else is on the ballot other than the presidential candidates. Because believe it or not, contrary to popular belief, there are other things other than candidates that can be on a ballot when it's election time. All right, y'all. So we know that voting the entire ballot is crucial. It's super duper important because it makes sure your voice is heard on all levels and about everything, not just about the high profile races like presidency or Congress, like we've been talking about. Okay. We know that the local and the state issues can have a direct impact on our daily lives. You've heard that every single episode. That's why it's relevant and that's why we're talking about it. Okay. So you may be wondering, like, what else can be on the ballot other than the names? You see all the signs in the street and in people's yards with names. So you may think that that's the only thing on the ballot. Well, no. And in a lot of states, there are things other than names on the ballot this term. And we're going to give you some specific examples of what they may look like in real time, things that are being voted on in our beloved country in 2024 that affect us. Because we know that if something happens in one state, it's only a matter of time before it trickles on over to another, right? So, okay, here's some examples so that you know what you might be looking for this year and beyond, though, okay? You may have some local tax initiatives that can pop up on the ballot. This gives you a chance to have your voice heard as it pertains to your taxes, you guys. Your local taxes, that's that state and property taxes, hello, that we all have to deal with, okay? So fundings for schools, libraries, or emergency services often depend on your local taxes and bonds, right? So voting on this can impact the quality of education, public safety, and other essential services that are in your area. When you don't vote on them, you have no voice, all right? Something else that you can see on the ballot is judicial and school board elections. So not just, mayor and president and congressmen, but also your local judges and school board members. We know that they make key decisions on the criminal justice policies and educational standards. Those are hot topics that we're always talking about and we seem to be so concerned about, but we have the opportunity to impact the decision makers in those roles, y'all. So these roles, the judicial, school board elections, that shapes everything from sentencing practices, what you go to jail for, how long you're there, what happens when you come out, right? We just talked about whether or not, felons have the right to vote and things. All of this is going to be dictated by the judicial elections that are also on the ballot. Yes. Constitutional amendments and policy measures are on the ballot. So North Carolina right now, like on our ballot, we have a state constitutional amendment that's there. So these are, important measures like anti-slavery amendments. Maybe we'll put a pin in that. Environmental protections, voting access laws. So whether or not you have to have a photo ID, baby, you voted on that. Somebody voted on that. So if you don't like the outcome, Did you cast a vote? Things as simple as that, are on the ballot, and we have an opportunity to push them in the way that we need to. So even for instance, recent state ballots have included amendments to remove, some specific language and even secure or not reproductive rights or LGBTQ rights. Like, we know all of this stuff comes up. The due process of it allows us to have a say so and a voice if we vote. And when it's time to vote is now. And these topics are on that same exact ballot. And too often people will go down and they'll check off the names. They'll check all the names they know. Sometimes they even just leave blank the names that they don't know. So they'll check. Yeah.
Guilty. When you said this young lady, I'm not. I've been able to vote for a while, okay? I've been able to vote for over 20 years, okay? And so early on, I was very guilty of, I recognize this name, therefore that's who I'm voting for. I don't know these people's policies, but I recognize the name, so we'll go with that. Or if their name sound black,
that's a real one.
If it's Ishmael Mohammed, and I say that because we have one, like we really have. I think that is his actual, Ishmael Mohammed. That's his name. I voted for him last time because I'm like, no, we need more people of color in some of these positions. And I know that this is going to get done because they're going to have the interest of their people. And so it works in some regards, right? But you still have to be very careful. You can't do that all the time, okay? But I am guilty 100% of doing exactly what you said, and shame.
It happens. And that's exactly why we've come together for this series here. So we tell folks, we all gonna do a little bit better moving forward. We're gonna be a little bit more informed moving forward and all that good jazz. Because even I can think, of course, we're not gonna get too specific, and we said we're keeping it bipartisan. But I taught a class one time that said all skin folk, not kinfolk. And so that's a whole nother conversation that here in North Carolina, we got some skin folk that's running that ain't kinfolk. So be careful. That's why we telling everybody to know the policy. Don't vote because of race. Don't vote because of gender. Don't vote because of political party. You vote because of policies, man.
And that part about not voting based on gender is so important because especially if you are a woman, and especially if you are a Black woman, that's a double negative in some cases. You cannot vote just because someone is Black or just because they're female, because they do not always have your best interest in heart. We talk about this all the time in our gender wars, right? How Black men and Black women ain't really getting along. So there's a lot of Black men who are voting against the interests of their Black women. There are a lot of white women voting against their own interests. Okay? We'll just leave it at that. Okay? So you have to actually look at the person. You can't say, oh, Betsy sounds like a good, wholesome name. You can't do that. Okay? You really got to look and see what Miss Betsy is talking about. Okay? John is a normal name. You know how many Johns we got this fucked up? Okay? You can't do that. Okay? You can't do it. You can't say all my neighbors have this sign. So instead of me saying I'm going to research it, I'm going to just vote the way my neighbors is voting. No, don't do that. Because your neighbors be stupid sometimes. And you never know. Like I live in a community that's pretty mixed. So like I can go down the same street. One neighbor will have a Harris Waltz. The other one will have a Trump Vance. Okay, like literally right next to each other. So I can't do that in my community. I can't go based off the signs. Now, if it's certain signs, if I see it in your yard, I might question any of the other signs that it's in your yard. And you know what? I'm like, if you are voting for this person, then I might not also want to vote for that person because I see that you got them signs together, baby, and that just don't go. So again, but you got to check. You have to check. Don't leave it up to the signs and the names. Please see who's on the ballot ahead of time and look at them people.
Hey, that sounds like a holistic approach. And we're all about being holistic, okay? So you can use different pieces to inform your decisions. but not one piece should ever inform your entire thought, right? But I'm the same way. Sometimes it's even if it's a name that I'm not quite sure, I got to go do some research about, but it's in the yard with who I already know I'm not voting for. I'd be like, oh, I guess I'm not voting for them either. But y'all know we're gonna, continue to do your research, make informed decisions and stuff. Okay. All right. So we actually have some examples that we do want to give, like to walk away, really food for thought, more so because depending on your state, they may affect you and they may not. Oh, but baby, they may not affect you, as in you may not have to vote on it this term immediately, but it does affect you.
And because it's probably coming.
Yeah,
it's probably coming.
So as we dive in here, like you'll see the relevance and how we're all still connected. We all still fighting this battle together. Equality, equity, all of it. Like we're still fighting it, man. Okay, so for the one for me that's most relevant, because I keep telling you, I'm in North Carolina, right? And like everything varies by state, the voter laws, vote, all of that. So we're being really intentional to let you know, hey, this is where I'm at. But there are 48 other states. Me and her, we only got 2. There are 48 other states. So you got to do your due diligence, okay? But this particular amendment that's on the ballot in North Carolina is interesting. And to be honest, I saw it because of a sample ballot. So I didn't even know that it was writing on the ballot. I saw a sample ballot. I'm like, whoa, what's this? Hold on. Do I put yes or no? So thank God for the sample ballots, right? So in North Carolina, we're voting on a citizens only voting amendment to the Constitution. Now, this would explicitly add that the voting rights are only given to citizens. Okay. The current wording in the Constitution already says this, though, right? So it grants voting rights to every person born in the United States and every person who has been naturalized. That's the way it's currently written. We know that says citizen. If you're born in the United States or you've been naturalized, you are a U.S. citizen. So that's the way it's already written. The proposed amendment aims to replace the phrase with only a citizen of the United States. Almost synonymous phrases when you think about the meaning of the phrases, right? But this is going to explicitly limit the voting rights to U.S. citizens only. So proponents argue that the shift from every person to only a citizen is intended to reinforce that non-citizens cannot vote. So if you are for this change, you are saying that it is intended to reinforce the fact that non-citizens cannot vote. Mind you, the way that is written, though, non-citizens can't vote.
I've seen a few. We've had a couple in Ohio. I think we just had a primary a few months ago, and that in the primary, it was one of them was something like that, where they were changing the wording on something. And sometimes the wording does need to be changed because some of these laws were written in Old English. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it does need to be rewritten and clarified a little bit. So I won't go too hard on North Carolina about that.
Well, same. Well, this one, and like not picking a stance explicitly, but I don't know, my face and my tone may give it away, who knows. But critics view it as unnecessary and potentially stigmatizing for immigrant communities, as there's, currently no evidence of widespread non-citizen voting in the state. And, at the very beginning of the series, we kind of gave you guys a little bit of background about us and where we come from and things like that. So I shared that I'm the child of a naturalized immigrant. And so this wording change piqued my interest, and I'm watching it very closely because my father absolutely loves his ability to vote, and it's something that he's super proud about. And we know that sometimes when one door becomes open, it leaves way for more conversation. So this one is interesting, but again, this is for you to make the call if you're a North Carolina resident and register to vote, which I know you are because you've already seen a good 4 episodes of this. Okay, so I know you're registered to vote. Does it matter to you? And which way are you going to vote? But I want you to know that it's on there for one. And then what it's doing is changing some language, some linguistics in the state constitution around who is eligible to vote. And is explicitly saying, U.S. citizens. So, you can ask yourself, is this going to cause any question down the line for naturalized citizens? Or, what is the long-term effects of said change? But yeah, know that it's on there. And then there's something that is super duper interesting that is on another ballot that Queen T is going to tell us about.
Yeah, so I actually have a couple of examples because, again, I'm registered as an independent, so I get all the bullshit, okay? They send me everything in the mail. However, my son works for a bigger company that has a union, okay? And so I mentioned how they had the pro-worker legislative candidates, right? But there's actually more in this fun little book. So in my state, I'm in Ohio, issue 1 is to end gerrymandering, okay? Which is a big deal in every state. Like every state has a problem with this. And so issue 1 has a lot of things that it would like to do. And then of course the union is vote yes. They say that it's good, okay? So you really need to do your own research. But if you're voting as your union, which we will talk about later about exploitation of celebrities and institutions to get votes, right? But we'll talk about that in another episode farther down the line. But it's important to know how these things will affect you. So if my son is not voting age yet, but he would need to know why this is important for him to at least pay attention to, even if he still wants to vote no on it, he would need to know how this affects him. And it empowers workers in this particular instance. It's about working individuals, blue collar individuals. And so that's all of Ohio, pretty much. And so that's something that's like super, super important that we actually pay attention to. And then there's also another one, issue 47 in Ohio. This is part of the public transportation era. So we talked earlier about how certain entities are not actual government entities, but the government helps in certain ways with these entities. So the Department of Transportation, right, is one of them. We have a place here called COTA. It's Central Ohio Transit Authority. And it is mostly just in Columbus. And it kind of goes a little bit out, but not too far. But it's mostly a Columbus thing. And this particular issue will help with sidewalks, crosswalks, and bikeways to make our communities more walkable communities, because we do have, like, even in my neighborhood, there were parts that didn't have sidewalks. But there's a lot of children and elementary schools, but there's no sidewalks. And so things like that. And it's an older community as well. It's older white people, but it's an older community as well. And so having a place for them to walk, we all know them older people who like to be out and walking in the neighborhood, the little mall walkers. You know what I'm saying? I live right next to the mall now. The mall walkers be out. You hear me? Because they don't have sidewalks. So now they got to walk in the mall. So things like that. Things like that to consider. We have another one. Now, this is just specifically for my city. They want to build a pool. However, there are some issues with the way who will be building this pool and who will have to pay for it. And so we got a nice little thing right here that just says why we should vote no about this community pool. Because it sounds great. Of course, we already have a community center that has an indoor pool. But we had a pool at Thomas Worthington High School. And I don't know that pool is open anymore because I didn't see anybody at it over the summer. But they were also doing construction on the high school, so it may have just been closed. So they may be trying to build a new pool. I didn't even consider that. But now I'm looking at this to see where was this pool even supposed to be, and what's going on with that old pool? Because I didn't realize the old pool was closed. So again, you have to do your own research. So outside of Ohio, there are a couple of states. This is going to sound crazy. There are some states that have slavery laws on the ballot this year. Now, I highly encourage you to look and see what is on the ballot this year for your state. Some of these are anti-slavery laws. Some of them aren't. And so make sure that you actually look at these. We're going to talk about California's anti-slavery law, okay? So, and I'm going to put the link at the bottom again so that you can read the full thing because it was a full article. I'm just going to quote parts of it. And this kind of goes to our previous conversation about felons, okay? Most of us know that if you've ever watched Orange is the New Black or any show really about life in a prison, you'll know that they do get jobs in there, right? But it's not necessarily fair. So the link is scrolling at the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead and read. So in 1850, California joined the United States Union as a state that outlawed indentured servitude and slavery, except for those serving out criminal punishment. The California State Senate placed a measure on the November ballot that would change the state's constitution to prohibit any kind of forced labor. A similar measure died in the legislature 2 years ago. This time, it passed by a vote of 33-3, and its approval drew loud cheers from supporters in the Capitol. The measure, authored by Assembly member Lori Wilson, she's Black, was one of the 14 bills the California Legislative Black Caucus prioritized this year as lawmakers worked to carry out recommendations from the state-funded reparations task force. The task force, again, there's that fun word that y'all love, reparations. Y'all be so pressed about some damn reparations, but won't hold a job and you make me sick. But that's a whole other conversation as well. The task force last year issued a detailed report on the legacy of slavery and inequity dating back to the gold rush when some Californians lived in enslavement despite California's status as a free state. The anti-slavery measure, known as Assembly Constitutional Amendment 8, that's a long name, but ACA 8, that's what we're going to call it, okay? ACA 8 would primarily affect state prison inmates. California prisons hand out about 65,000 work assignments to inmates every year, according to a 2001 official estimate. Critics say inmates often experience retaliation when they turn down dangerous assignments, hampering their futures and ability to focus on rehabilitation. There's that word again. We love it. State prisons hire incarcerated people for a variety of tasks, such as for janitorial, construction, and fire safety. Technicians who are incarcerated make around 30 to 48 cents per hour. I'm going to read that again. Technicians who are incarcerated make around 30 to 48 cents per hour. Inmates who work inmates who work to contain wildfires earn more. They earn around $5.80 to $10.25 per day. Not per hour, per day, okay? And if you think they only out there for a couple hours, you're mistaken, because you gonna work an 8-hour shift for $5? Oh, okay. The campaign to place the anti-slavery measure on the ballot has maintained that it is not opposed to prisoners holding jobs. The dignity of the work is in the choice to pick up a profession that could lead to favorable skills in the future. They say, not being forced into a job that an inmate does not want to do. And this is a quote. Incarcerated people's relationship to work shouldn't be one of exploitation and little to no agency. That is from the person who authored the bill. Let us take this step to restore some dignity and humanity and prioritize rehabilitative services for the often forgotten individuals behind bars. That was her quote. Efforts to end the practice of forced labor by California inmates came up short in 2022 when a similar measure stalled in the Senate. The state finance department estimated it would cost $1.5 billion, a number that tanked support for the proposal. That was based on how much money it would cost the state to pay minimum wage, which is now $16 an hour, for prison jobs. Activists against involuntary servitude said they didn't take chances this time. They worked with the governor, Gavin Newsom, to secure agreements over language in the amendment. The California Democratic Party also endorsed their efforts, which helped them drum up support for the legislature. The idea that we have to pay individuals should have never been any reason for us to not end slavery, because we should not be interested in exploiting human labor. End quote. So, yes, there are slavery. This slavery is on the ballot in 2024. And I feel like the way we treat them, yes, they committed crimes, but sometimes the crime they commit is not the sentence that they got. And especially with the dangerous conditions in some of these prisons, and the deplorable conditions of some of these prisons. I had a cousin who went in right before COVID, and then everything shut down. So his court date got pushed back. He ended up being in there for a year, which meant he was in there over the summer, and they had no AC the entire time. So, things to consider. Yes, they committed a crime. Yes, they need to do the time. But the conditions in which they do that time and what happens when they come out is still very important. Mm-hmm. So, that's my soapbox for the day.
So, I mean, I think too with that, it's like I want to highlight and make bold and underline and scream the fact that most of these prisons are private owned. And that, so when you think about that, this is a private owned institution that's turning a profit. Like you said it all, but I just want to like bold it and underline it. I'm like, do y'all hear what she's saying? This private institution ain't got nothing to do with you or me. Is turning a profit from this, okay, nearly free labor. We won't call it free labor, but it's nearly free labor. It's 38 cents an hour, bro. And they're getting a profit from it. So we see how it is modern day slavery, right? You know what I mean? It almost incentivizes, not almost, let's be honest, it incentivizes high incarceration rates, because the more folk that we can get in there from the private standpoint, the more bodies is the more workers, is the more productivity, is the more profit. And so we can see how that like directly aligns with what we talk about, the school to prison pipeline and just all those other complexes that are sending Black and brown folk, low income folk, not that smart folk, to jail. And why?
And what was crazy is that also in this article, I didn't read it, but also in this article, they talk with someone who is in prison and is going through this process. And he says how he had to, because he was also in school while in prison, right? So he said there were times where he wasn't allowed to turn down the job. So he had to go to the job, which means he was missing classes in order to get his education so that when he got out, he was qualified for other things than crime. And so that's kind of the point that they were trying to make. Like, these aren't jobs that the people want to have. It's just jobs they're making them do. Mm-hmm. And it's not always jobs that are giving them a skill set to where they'd actually be able to work when they leave. Because as a janitor, there are still some places where they won't let you work because you are now a felon. Mm-hmm. Or even a misdemeanor in some cases. But usually you don't spend that much time in there for a misdemeanor to get a job. But as a felon, there's so many places where they won't let you work. But that's all they trained you to do. They didn't train you to do certain things that you can trade sometimes. Mm-hmm. You don't get to learn trades, which really, we need mechanics. And I don't care if my mechanic shot someone in the face while they were drunk, because you're not going to be drunk working on my car. Okay? So I don't care that you assaulted someone, not sexually, but like regular assault. I don't care that you fought somebody. I don't care that y'all fought. I'm glad you didn't shoot him. In this case, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't care that you argued and got disorderly conduct. You know what I'm saying? I don't care about that stuff. Just fix my car, bro. Mm-hmm. Just fix my car. I don't care.
We know that there's much exploring to be done about these systems, and I guess that's what we're doing. This is the tip of the iceberg of the exploring these systems. We always say all is one. So, depending on what side of the internet you're catching us from, you probably heard us say that a time or two. And so, like even earlier when we first started talking about this, I said you might not be directly affected this election year because you're not voting, but these things affect all of us. So I thought it was amazing to see like this conversation has been being had. And I wasn't aware that we were still talking about anti-slavery. But just for like perspective, a few perspective things, and it can also help you, make your thoughts about certain states. Maybe you want to move and you're wondering what states do I move to and where do I not move to, right? But in 2018, Colorado led the movement. So Colorado was pretty progressive. We already know that. So they passed a measure to remove the language. Colorado, 2018, right? They were followed by Nebraska and Utah in 2020. So these three states off the bat say, you know what? Take that language out. We're not having it. Okay.
And it's also worth noting that 2018 was not a presidential election year.
Good point. Good point. So if you weren't paying attention to the ballot, hello. That's why you always got to pay attention to the ballot. So look, in 2022, voters in Alabama, Tennessee, Oregon, and Vermont also approved similar measures. Okay.
Which was also not an election year for president.
Now, this I thought was interesting. So we just heard all these folks that went ahead. How many states did we say? At least 5 or 6 states approved taking out said language that we are saying is a little slippery, a little tricky. We need to take it out. However, Louisiana voters, good old Louisiana, rejected an anti-slavery measure that same year in 2022 due to confusion over its wording, which some believed might unintentionally allow certain exceptions to persist. Because I gave air quotes because that was the quote. That was why they rejected it in Louisiana. It was some miscommunication about the wording. Okay. Take with that what you will, but I thought that was interesting that we've been having this conversation now since 2018. We should have been having it before, but I mean, I'm glad that the conversation is coming up because again, these are private institutions that are turning a profit off of some folks that shouldn't even be in there. But that's a wider conversation for later. Okay, and I think it goes into like that is related to something else that blew my mind the other day, because we're talking about these laws being on the books that nobody is going back to check and update. So the Casual Killing Act, I'm not sure if you're already familiar, maybe you are, blew my mind not too long ago, was Virginia specific, but there were other variations of it, but it excused the murder of enslaved people. Pretty much casual killing. It was okay to kill a slave if said slave was running away, being disobedient or disrespectful, all these different reasons why it was excused to murder enslaved people. Do you guys know that that is a law, that's legislation that's still on Virginia's books that has never been overturned? So the Casual Killing Act is law, it's legal. And obviously we know that slavery was overturned. And I think maybe y'all saw the light bulb go off in my head.
I got something to say. Don't worry.
If we're talking about the loophole where slavery is still permissible, if it's a punishment, Lord, that's a whole nother conversation. So was slavery really ever outlawed? Okay, that's mind-blowing me right now. And for 2, this Casual Killing Act. So think about that thing, y'all. If we're saying that, you're almost getting slave labeling by being a prisoner because of said loophole. And then on the books, we're saying it's okay to kill slaves if they're doing something wrong.
Add to that, stand your ground laws in certain states.
There you go. Yeah, man.
Again, we're talking about Florida. And then also, when I was looking up, the slavery, there's some states where it's not necessarily anti-slavery as in indentured servitude, but it's anti-human trafficking, because there is not a lot of laws about human trafficking, because that's all slavery was. Slavery was human trafficking. And so now they have to include certain language and include exceptions for human trafficking, because that is the new slavery. That is the modern day slavery, is human trafficking. So if you have, for lack of a better term, a slave because you bought a human illegally, it's not legal, but you still bought a whole human, or you kidnapped a whole human. It's very iffy in some of these states about that, that right to kill. Like, you have to really pay attention to the wording in some of these things. And that's why when you were talking about what's in North Carolina, I was like, I'm not even gonna hold them, because the wording in certain things, it's touchy, and sometimes it really needs to be updated to include certain situations that may not have been thought about before. Nobody was thinking about human trafficking because it was just called slavery.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have to consider human trafficking and sex slaves as well, because sometimes those aren't people that were human trafficked. They're literally family members that are in your household that live with you, and they end up in that situation. And so again, that's things that we could talk about another time in depth, but there's definitely some changes that have to be made at the legislature part of every state that can help clean up some of these things.
And cleaning it up, I think that's something that we can explore once we get through this, like the nitty gritty of the election season, like, because that's what a lot of it comes down to. If we do the grassroots movements, we do the community service, we focus on family legacy building and things like that. But for the political side of it, the systematic change that we want to see is going to happen on the books. Like, if we care about the system, don't get me wrong, you can go make your own system. Sometimes I think that's what I want to do. I'm going to buy my own 40 acres. We're going to have Black Wall Street. We're going to make our own system. But if we are going to concern ourselves with this system, that's how we're going to see change, is the systematic. It's looking at the laws, fixing the wordings, overturning the stuff that needs to be not overturning stuff that needs to stay where it's at. So it starts with this knowledge and us to get out there and get active, man.
Mm-hmm. And we are going to talk about, because it's worth noting, and it's part of the series, it's part of the title, Politics of a Priestess. We really need to talk about the political ramifications of the religious vote, or religious lack of vote, because there are certain religions that do not vote because it's of the world and they are not of the world, or they are not to be of the world. And so we have entire communities of people who don't vote at all. And so they're not voting against their own interests. They're literally shooting themselves in the foot and then being mad. So go vote, rock the vote, get out the vote, whatever the saying is this year. I don't know. Just register and go vote, please, dear God, go vote.
Cosigns. There's no more to say. And if you have the last part that she just said, if you know folks that's not voting because of their religious views, if you are a folk that's not voting because of your religious views, please turn into the episode about separation of church and state. We got some messages for you there, okay?
Yes, we do. We love y'all. Thank y'all for joining us. We're going to release a whole new level to the series here in a few days, but we want to make sure we got these out to you. So make sure you watch the entire series. I think we made 6. I don't even remember how many we made now. We ran through them though. So watch all the videos in this part of the series. Comment, like, share, subscribe. This is going to be on both of our channels, so I don't know which channel you're watching it from, but like, subscribe, all the things. And then make sure you tune in next week, because it's gonna be crunch time next week, so we're gonna get these all out to you. We love y'all.
We love you.
Bye.